The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline, a Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike. Sam, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty damn well. Hey, it's here.
Yeah.
The episode that people have been waiting for, Mike.
That people have harassed JJ Redick for online.
For weeks. And it's finally here.
To do it. Yeah. We're obviously both very, very excited about this episode. Lots of stuff has happened since the last time we recorded. All-Star Weekend. Devin Booker had a cool dunk. They finally updated us on Chris Paul's injury. We don't have a ton of time to talk about this because we know what you guys want to hear. So obviously we'll get into that interview very quickly here. But Sam, is there anything that you wanted to bring up before we get to that?
I mean, I'm just really excited for people to hear this. It's honestly crazy to me that it even happened still. Yeah. I remember after, because I think we discussed this amongst ourselves at one point, after JJ officially confirmed that it was really happening, which by the way we wanted to keep under wraps, but he just put out there on Twitter at one point. Yeah. I think because you guys were harassing him so much on Twitter about it that he was like, all right, fuck it, I'll say yes, I'm doing this. I was still thinking to myself, man, what the hell is he doing this for? Going on this niche team specific podcast. But I had a great time talking with him, and I'm really excited for people to hear it. The Chris Paul news is obviously big. I think we'll probably cover that in greater detail, kind of as the next week develops, maybe on the next episode, and we get to see what the team looks like without Chris Paul. I have suspicions, but for instance, the Pelicans game is tonight. We're going to start to see how they play without him. And I'm definitely curious about that.
Definitely, yeah. But we'll switch right over to that. We appreciate all of you guys for listening to this episode. If you're new to this podcast, we appreciate you as well. And here we go. All right, first off, JJ, thank you so much for joining us. This is very cool for us, and I think Suns fans are going to be very, very excited about this one.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I also appreciate your level of detail on Twitter. Always appreciate people who really get into the game and study the game. So happy to be here.
Well, then you're going to love this first question because I'm going to give you some indirect credit for the Suns being good. And here's what I mean by that. February 1st, 2021, Devin Booker and Chris Paul have played 18 games together. They're 10-8. The Suns are playing the Mavericks. They're down by 2. There's a few seconds left in the game. Apparently, Chris Paul goes to the huddle and calls a play for the Suns. Devin Booker curls around a screen at the three-point line, shoots a three-point shot. The Suns win. Devin Booker hits a game winner. Mm-hmm. After that game, I consider it a turning point for the Suns. The Suns went 40-13. That game ends. Chris Paul says, I actually called that play in the timeout. It was an old play for JJ Redick that the Suns used to run with the Clippers. So thank you for that. I give you some credit for that. First of all, do you remember that play and when it happened?
Yes. Yeah, I remember the Devin play, and I also remember we had a couple variations of it that we would run in LA with Doc, and I hit a game winner against the Blazers on a variation of it, and then I hit a shot against Philly in Philly to put a game into overtime on that play. So I remember it. I remember Devin's shot. CP, like a lot of great players, has an incredible memory. He's just the epitome of a student of the game, and is. I mean, I said this on my podcast to him, so this is not a knock. I mean this in the most complimentary way possible. But he is a legit sicko. I mean, the guy is really just addicted to basketball and competition and winning and does all the things necessary to be great.
You know, you and Tommy, JJ, I know you guys already have your own merch. You would have to get the rights on this with Chris. It would have to be a tag team effort. But I think if you paired together and got some like episode specific sicko merch, I think a lot of people would be interested in that.
I'd buy that.
Out there. I would 100% buy it.
Oh man, I should talk to CP about this. I think if we can get some sort of animated version of his face on a T-shirt with the name Sicko, I think that'd be great. I would love that.
You know, I want to ask you. You're obviously an NBA player for a long time. I mean, you've been in the basketball eye. People have been watching you since college. Probably, I imagine a lot of people even since high school. But now you're in the media, right? You've done both things, and you were one of the people. I think one of the NBA players that very early on was talking about how good Devin Booker was and what he could be in the NBA. And quickly after that, guys like LeBron James talked about it, Kobe Bryant talked about it, Dwayne Wade, Jimmy Butler. A lot of guys were early on very in on Devin Booker and what he could be in the NBA. But I did feel like, and I think a lot of Suns fans will vouch for this, it took the media some time to catch up, I think. And so for some reason, there was a lot of NBA players very early on in on him. The media spent the entirety of like the first 4 years of his career debating whether or not he was good. And then, of course, we've seen what he's become in the NBA since then. You've done both, obviously. You were an NBA player. You're in the media now. Why do you think there was a disconnect between the NBA players who were very early on in on him and the media who took a while to get there?
The Suns weren't very good, especially early on, prior to him really reaching an all-NBA, all-star level, which he's been now for a number of seasons. I think that 70 ball probably had a lot to do with it in terms of making him a household name. I remember watching very early on in his rookie year, and he was, I don't know why I have this image like seared in my brain, but he wasn't playing a lot early on. And the camera panned to him on the bench, and he had this smile on his face. And I'll never forget the look. And I remember just saying, I thought I'm watching the game, I'm like, that motherfucker's going to be good. I hadn't even really seen him play yet. There's just a confidence. There's a belief in self that he's always had as an NBA player. And playing for the Clippers as well, and getting to play them 4 times a year. Those first couple years when I was in LA and getting to battle against Devin, you could see right away just how talented he was. And keep in mind, like he was 19 and 20 years old when he was doing this his first couple years. But look, I think the media, and this is just a general statement about the NBA media, the media generally gravitates their stories and attention to the best teams and the best players, and the real fans, the sickos like CP and I, are watching Sacramento and Oklahoma City on a Tuesday night, and trying to figure out who the next guys are. And I think that's part of it, and that probably doesn't play well in traditional media.
I got to ask about one specific Booker game, because this is one of my favorite, by far, still to this day, one of my favorite Devin Booker performances. Clearly one of his early career highlights. Do you remember when he dropped 46 on you guys when you played for Philly?
Oh, God. Oh, my God. Yeah. That was... I think he had 2 big games, I guess. That was in 17-18. That was my first year there.
That was... Yes, It was your first year there. It was his third season. And I knew I had to ask you this specifically because there's this one specific play where he's on fire.
Oh, I know the play. I know
end of the fourth quarter.
You're going to bring up. Yeah, so
he's wearing you in his jersey.
So
top of the key 3.
I was never a stopper, but there was a stretch of my career where I guarded my position no matter what the matchup was. I had to guard Ginobili at times. I had to guard Kobe at times. I had to guard D Wade. And it wasn't, because of my wingspan, there was not a lot I could do against bigger players. But that year in Philly, I would a lot of times guard the point guard. That was Ben's rookie year, so I would always start on the point guard. So I, for some reason, had to guard Kemba a lot that year. I had to guard Dame when we played Portland. So Devin was giving it to everybody, and finally, towards the end of the game, and it was we were getting our asses kicked in the first half, and I know I had a big second half, but a number of us got us going, and we cut into the lead. I don't think we were ever really in a position to win the game, but we cut into the lead, and Devin just kept wearing us out. And finally, towards the end of the game, I was like, let me check him. And I remember that possession vividly, and I guarded him really well. And,
yeah, you did.
And he was, he picked up his dribble, and he just, I mean, if I was any closer to him, it would have been a 4-point play. He's a shot maker. And look, going back to what I said earlier, I saw that when I played for the Clippers when he was 19 and 20 years old. I knew he was going to be special in this league. Anybody who has that ability to create and play at that pace and score at all three levels is going to be special. And on top of that, as we've seen, he works, he gets better, he competes, he loves the game. When I interviewed CP afterwards, we were talking, he said, Devin Book is one of us. He's a sicko too.
That is one of the best NBA podcasts I've ever heard, along with, I think, the previous appearance by Chris Paul on your podcast. And I would throw in the Draymond Green interview that you guys had previous to that as some of my favorite NBA content I've ever heard. Just people like that who see the game at their level, along with you, of course. You guys having that kind of conversation, it's exactly, I think, what people who are NBA fans need to hear in order to truly appreciate the game at the highest level. And of course, we're recording this. It's actually our first podcast after we learned that Chris Paul has an avulsion fracture in his thumb and is probably going to miss the majority of the rest of the regular season, if not maybe come back for a game or two, maybe even miss a few playoff games potentially, depending on the actual time frame of the injury. The Suns are still they have a good lead on Golden State. They have the best record in the NBA still. How do you think that affects them with this final stretch of the season? It's one of the latest All-Star breaks that we've had, so it's actually a pretty short stretch of the season to end this season. When you think about the Suns and how they've been playing, obviously Chris Paul is a huge part of this. What do you think that does to them for this final stretch of the season?
Yeah, it's a good point. I was thinking about this the other day because I can remember in my career, you always sort of, as you get to January, and that's really the grind of the season, is that stretch from January 1st to the All-Star break. And you remember, you're like, okay, we got to get to game 54. Some years it was 53, 55, and this year, for whatever reason, it was game 58, game 59 for most teams. So there's a lot more games that have been played this season. I would expect the Suns to end up with the 1 seed in the West. Mathematically, I think the Warriors would have to go, I think, 18-5, and the Suns would have to go 12-12. And that's not out of the question, but this is a Suns team without Chris that has made a lot of strides under Monty Williams. We obviously can go back to the bubble, 8-0, but individually, each guy, whether it's Book or Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, DeAndre Ayton, these guys are battle tested and they know how to win basketball games. There's a carryover to winning culture. There's a corporate knowledge that gets instilled in groups as they make deep playoff runs, and certainly Chris is a huge part of that. But I would expect them to finish with the 1 seed, even if Golden State pops off and goes on a run here. But I don't know that I'm bullish on Golden State doing that without a healthy Draymond Green.
You mentioned Monty there. I think everyone knows your connection with Chris Paul, obviously having played with him for a long time. I'm not 100% sure that everyone knows exactly your connection with Monty Williams, that he was assistant coach in Philly while you were there. I think that was your second season, but correct me if I'm wrong. Did you have any lasting impressions from that season with Monty? And at any point throughout his current run with the Suns, has it surprised you that he's been able to turn around the Suns to as much of a degree as he has?
It hasn't surprised me at all. Obviously, Chris plays a huge role in this leap they've made from missing out on the play-in game in the bubble to then being in the finals and now being the best team in basketball. But Monty's also a big part of that. Monty was one of my favorite coaches I've played for. And I think with us, he was sort of in charge of all the set pieces, fourth quarter winning time, execution stuff. So when we would do our breakouts in practice, I just remember him being so detail oriented. And even on a team with guys like me and Ben and Joel and Tobias and Jimmy, he would take us through these plays that we knew the plays and we had run the plays, but every rep, 5-on-0 had to be so crisp and so right. It was a little old school, but I loved it. And then my other impression of him was just what an incredible human being he is. He's one of the most caring coaches I've ever been around. He's fully invested in his players. Him and I had some amazing conversations. We'd have practice or walk through or whatever, and I'd get my work in with Kevin Young, and then Monty would sort of come over and he would work a lot with Landry prior to Landry getting traded, and we'd finish up our shooting, and Monty and I would sit there and talk for 20 or 30 minutes after practice. Meanwhile, I had to get in a car and drive back up the New Jersey Turnpike. But I just enjoyed back to Brooklyn. But I just enjoyed being around Monty every day, and those are my takeaways: details, caring, and just a hell of a human being.
You mentioned Landry Shamet, who is on the Suns. Suns obviously traded for Landry Shamet before this season. He's been injured lately. He should be back. We're recording this before the OKC game. I think he'll be back tonight. We'll get to see him play again. But in these lineups with Chris Paul or just on the Suns, I think obviously people would say that he's attempting to approximate what you did with Chris Paul. And in a lot of ways, he's in the mold that you sort of created in the NBA, trying to do so much of what you do, similar size as you. As of right now, in a surprising twist, I think he's shooting the worst three-point percentage of his career so far with the Suns, and I think somehow he has struggled to find his place with this team so far. If you were to give him advice, what's the type of things that you would say to him at this point to try and get back going?
Well, I talk to Landry all the time, so I do,
great.
I do give him advice. No, Landry's my guy, and actually I connected him with my 7th, 8th, and 9th inning trainer, the guy who took care of me my last few years in the NBA. I met him when I moved to New York in 2017, so we worked together for 4 years, and he was so good for my body. And Landry's been working with him, and I know there's been some health stuff with his foot and ankle. But to me, look, I think in some respects, getting to play with me and learn from me my rookie year with him was a great thing. And we obviously developed a friendship, so for me it was also awesome. But in some regards, I think people cast him as a catch-and-shoot player, a pin-down player, a DHO player like me, when this is a guy who has played point guard his entire career prior to the NBA. I remember there was a game in Philly. We had a bunch of guys out. I was out. And he got to handle the ball a ton in the fourth quarter. And you could just see it. That you could see a comfort level and a confidence. And so I at times feel for him, because being a guy who doesn't have the ball in your hands a lot, there's an art to getting into a rhythm. And as he's gone from Philly, because I watched the NBA, so I know this, as he's gone from Philly to the Clippers and then Clippers to Brooklyn to Phoenix, I think specifically in Brooklyn and Phoenix, it's been really hard for him to get into rhythms. His playing time has been sporadic. His health has been sporadic. And as a shooter, that's very difficult. I look back early on in my NBA career playing for Stan Van Gundy and not being in that rhythm, not knowing game to game what time I was going to go in, even sometimes if I was even going to play. And my second and third year, my percentages weren't great. You're coming in, you're getting a 5.5 minute run. You might get 1 or 2 shots up. You might force one because you haven't had a shot. So I think that's been tough. Where I think in Philly and then in with the Clippers that year and a half with, I guess it was 2 years with Doc. There was a rhyme and a reason to when he was going to play and how he was going to play. But I still think he's got a very bright future in the league. He takes care of himself. He's in tremendous shape, and he's got an elite skill. He's a great shooter.
That phenomenon that you're kind of talking about, would you describe it kind of as a general trend in the NBA right now with where players are, the skill level that players of this generation come out of their draft class with? Maybe that more than ever players are coming out more skilled and asked to wear more hats, but then are maybe pigeonholed into these roles of just being a catch and shoot guy or just being a pin down guy where they kind of struggle to find themselves? Or do you think that's a general trend in the NBA, or do you not agree with that?
No, I totally agree with it. Not even just being pigeonholed. I think in general, the players that are coming into the NBA now at 19, 20 are, from a skill standpoint, are way more developed than my generation of players coming out, even like myself at age, I think, 20. I got drafted 2 days after my 22nd birthday, so I was 22. But a lot of guys were 21, 22. We'd come out junior year, senior year. And then, of course, the one-and-done era happened, and now you've seen this explosion in youth training, basically, just where guys have personal trainers and basketball trainers as young as 10, 11, 12. And so the things they can do with a basketball, a spin move to a drop dribble to a step back, right or left. A lot of us didn't learn that till much later in our career. And they play a ton of basketball, but I'm going to sound like an old person here, but I think my generation will unequivocally agree with this. They're way more skilled than we ever were. I'm not sure they know how to play basketball as well as we knew how to play basketball. There's a big difference between knowing how to play and being able to do a skill, and that just takes time. I'm not going to single any young player out, but there's a bunch of guys that I see across the league this year, either in their first or second year. I look at them and I'm amazed by their talent. I'm amazed by their skill, but they got a ways to go to understanding the game. And again, we've tried to de-incentivize winning, or tanking rather. We've tried to de-incentivize tanking with changing the lottery odds, but there's also a skill in learning how to play good basketball while you're trying to win. Mm-hmm. And I'll take this back to the Suns. That was the knock on Book. Oh, he's a good player on a bad team. He can't be a good player on a good team. And that's where I think we got it wrong, obviously. Or I don't think I was in that camp, but we as the NBA world, we got that wrong. But I think playing that year for Monty was so big for him, and getting a guy like CP was so big for him. So the skills were always there. Devin always knew how to play, but then having that translate onto an elite team is really impressive.
Yeah, you're talking about basketball versus skills, like understanding the game, and I think that there has been teams that have taken advantage of the difference between those two. I think one of the best examples is the Memphis Grizzlies, just where they got Desmond Bane, for example, and what they were able to do with that kind of pick. And I think the Suns did it too in Mikal Bridges, being able to draft him. And in some ways, I think of this as older guys who played in college a little bit longer, who are able to come to the NBA and contribute a little bit early. But I've noticed with Mikal Bridges, first of all, he knows basketball. I think that's clear from anyone who watches the team. But it seems like NBA players love Mikal Bridges a lot, whether it be if people are talking about the Suns, like former NBA players are talking about the Suns, they'll always bring up Mikal Bridges very early on in their analysis. Or, when Chris Paul first got to the Suns, he was like, man, this guy Mikal Bridges is really good. Damian Lillard actually called Mikal Bridges one of his favorite players in the NBA. Why do you think NBA players gravitate to Mikal Bridges so much?
It's very simple. You need a Mikal Bridges on your team to win basketball games. And when I was going on that semi-rant a second ago, I should have brought up Mikal, because Mikal's a perfect example of a guy who knows how to play basketball. And certainly Mikal has skills, and because he plays on the Suns, he probably doesn't get to show off all his skills all the time, but he's willing to sacrifice that. But his strengths in terms of understanding the game, I think he's one of the smartest cutters in the league. His defense, obviously, but his intelligence on defense as well. He knows how to use his size. He knows how to use his length. There was a clip, I believe it was the Chicago game. CP got going and was going left on a pick and roll, and Mikal was in the right wing. He was on the double side of the spread pick and roll, and CP, obviously basketball genius, Mikal filled in behind towards the top of the key. CP threw what looked like a pocket pass to DeAndre Ayton, who was open in the pocket. Mm-hmm. He actually threw it to Mikal, who filled in. The timing was so beautiful, and Mikal, of course, attacked the closeout, got left, and scored. But it's plays like that. There's nothing fancy about that play. But for a hoop head, that's basketball porn. That's just really good basketball. And I guarantee you, CP and Mikal have talked about that. That's a thing that they've talked about in-game, out-of-game, after practice, after a film session. Here's the timing of when to fill back in. If they run you off, attack that closeout. And so in this league, and why I say this about Mikal, about needing guys like him to win, in this league you have to have talent to win. You have to have a great player. A lot of times you have to have two great players. And as we've seen time and time again, the teams that go and get three great players, it then becomes very difficult to surround them with guys like Mikal. Unless you get really, really lucky late in the draft, or have an amazing player development program with undrafted like, it's just very hard to fill out a roster with 5 or 6 other really good players. And so that's why Mikal is so valuable, because he could literally go to any good team, any great team right now, and they're instantly better.
You said something really interesting about Mikal's defense. I think it was on your Draymond episode with Tommy. This was before Draymond hopped on with you guys, so it was in like the analysis bit. And it's funny because actually I went back, I listened to it again. At the time, you were reading out the Defensive Player of the Year odds. Mikal was 4th. More recently, I haven't checked the odds as of today, but more recently, like I just saw a power ranking, I think, from the NBA's website with him in 2nd as of like recently during the All-Star break. So he seems to be climbing up those rankings more and more. The really interesting thing that I heard you say in that episode was you called him the anchor of the Suns defense, as opposed to DeAndre Ayton, which for the record is something I think I agree with. But the reason it's interesting is because it kind of goes away. It's a departure, I think, from the prevailing logic that we hear in NBA circles. I feel like 99% of the time when you hear someone referred to as a defensive anchor, they fall into one of two camps. Either they're the traditional Rudy Gobert type drop back, protect the rim big, or they're the alternative Draymond Green type big. The, maybe more of a wing when he came into the league, but still logs heavy minutes at the center position for what the Warriors do. For Mikal, obviously he can switch 1 through 4, and I think we've seen a lot of his defensive value be obvious and be displayed. What is it for you that makes him stand out, though, kind of in a modern era where people are talking about wingspans all the time. People are talking about wanting switchable wings all the time. And now we have dozens of these guys in the NBA who are like these long-limbed switchable players. It seems like it's harder than ever to stand out from that position defensively. So what is it about Mikal that makes him stand out to the point where you can call him really not just a really good defender, but like actually he anchors the whole system for the Suns?
Yeah, no, you bring up really good points, and you're 100% correct. And when we talk about people that can anchor a defense, the traditional thought behind that is a drop back five like Joel, Rudy Gobert, a Dwight Howard in his prime, Jared Allen now, and Draymond to me is the closest approximation of who Mikal is and will eventually become as a defender. Although they're very different, and Draymond to me is a unicorn defensively, and one of the smartest players on that end of the floor, and really offensively too, that we've seen in our league. What makes Mikal so great? You mentioned his length, and this is probably not that much of a common knowledge, but I'll just say it. Most guys that are long can't stay in front of anybody. Like, I've played with those guys. Most guys that are long can't really guard, don't have the strength to guard in the post. Mikal has the strength to guard in the post. Mikal stays in front of people and uses his length. And what that allows him to do is basically completely disrupt an offensive possession. Because a lot of guys are disruptive in the sense that they come over help side and they use their length to get a deflection. They go over a pick and roll and they get the rear view contest and they get a piece of the ball. They get beat off the dribble and they reach from behind and they get a deflection. Mikal is disruptive in all those things, don't get me wrong. But he's disruptive in the sense that because he can sniff stuff out and stay in front of you, he can prevent. I've seen possessions where he completely prevents the offense from even getting into their play. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you get to 5-6 seconds on the clock and you're like, what the fuck? So that to me is what makes him so elite on that end of the floor.
Yeah, it's funny. I know exactly what you're talking about in that he just disrupts them and they can't get into their offense, but it's also a great example of something that just defensive stats cannot pick up. They don't capture when a team is getting into their offense 8 seconds later because Mikal Bridges wouldn't let them run a DHO. He was just sort of night crawling his way in front of the DHO and stopping them from getting into it. That's just not something that is. You have to watch. You ultimately have to watch in order to see those types of things.
Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Handpicked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
I want to ask you about another Suns player coming off the bench, and it's Cameron Johnson. Earlier, you were talking about players who are pigeonholed into certain roles. When Cameron Johnson was drafted onto the Suns, we were just sort of sold this idea in all the draft coverage that he's a shooter and not much else. You know, there wasn't really the best shooter in the draft. You know, people called him. It's not like he just said he was the shooter. They called him the best shooter. It's a compliment. An older player. People were shocked the Suns took him that high in the draft at 11th. Most people had him mocked in the mid to late 20s. You know, people said they should have traded back, yada, yada, yada. He seems to be really finding his way lately. And with the injuries the Suns have had, he's picked up his offense. His efficiency is at an all-time high for him. It's his best season by far. What do you think he can become? What do you think the ceiling is for Cameron Johnson and the type of player he can be in the NBA?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and to me, it's hard to think of a comp right off the top of my head. I would really have
James Jones is what we say.
James, he might be a little better than James was. No, I mean, I brought this up a number of times, either on ESPN or on the podcast, but he's a guy who, when he started this season as a starter, he's giving you 18 and 5. I mean, he's a guy, I believe this, if he's on 25 of the other teams, and that's just, plus or minus. I'm not saying exactly 25. I'm not going to name the 25 teams, but if he's on majority of the teams in the NBA, if he's starting on them, he's a guy that's going to give you 15 to 20 points a night on good efficiency. I didn't know much about Cam. I don't watch a ton of basketball or a ton of college basketball, and so when he came into the league, I didn't know a ton about him. I'd seen him play in a Duke UNC game, and that was about it. And college basketball, to me, is very hard to judge how a guy will translate, but a guy who can shoot always has really good value in the NBA. And as a guy who made a living as a shooter, there's a few things you can do to make yourself even better and build your skill set. You can be really good moving without the ball, and you can be really good attacking closeouts. And Desmond Bane, to me, is a guy that I think of that is so good attacking closeouts. He's got, for especially a guy in his second year, he's got one of the best shot fakes I've seen. His shot mechanics are so compact that his shot fake just looks amazing. And Cam has a similar efficiency to his biomechanical shot. And he's so good attacking closeouts. We've seen, obviously, a few times some high-level athleticism, finishing at the rim. But then again, along with Mikal, and this is where I think Monty just comes into this, Monty's always thinking the game. Kevin Young always thinking the game. CP, obviously. Cam's another guy who's a really good cutter. He's really good off the ball. In pin down sets, those little wide pin downs they run out of delay action when they just, somebody brings it down the right or left side and Ayton goes and pins down for Cam. He's really good turning the corner and getting into that 15-foot area and either hitting the pull-up jumper or shooting the floater. So again, he's not, similar to Mikal, he's not a guy who is going to have the ball in his hands creating like CP or creating like Booker, but their skills are perfect complements to CP and Book. And those guys have become really good basketball players. They're really good off the ball. They're really good attacking closeouts. They're really good getting to their spots. So to me, he's not just a shooter. He's a great offensive player.
I've been wanting to ask you a question about your content, to change the subject a little bit. But there's maybe not a way to do it that's not corny, so bear with me. I want to ask you about analytics because it's a buzzword. I feel like I have to do it. I feel like we have the opportunity. We've got a former NBA player on the pod. I have to do it. As a caveat, I'll point out there's absolutely a wrong way to talk about analytics. There are people who put too much stock in analytics. There are people who use stats out of context. That being said, I think it's fair to say, of all the former players turned analysts, you have been one of the most open that I've seen to in using advanced numbers as part of your arguments on the pod now that you've joined ESPN. Does that say something to you about maybe how far the analytics movement has come in the past decade? Or could you maybe speak to what it was like in the latter half of your career, being in locker rooms from a player's perspective? Is there a message here behind analytics that was starting to resonate more with players, or was it kind of more like franchises were just kind of hiring these weird dudes who hung out in, the top floor of a practice facility, but never really conversed with the players, right? I as a fan, I feel like it's hard. We argue about this incessantly, but it's hard to really understand what that dialogue is like between players. It certainly feels like you and your generation is more open to the concept than prior ones, but I'm wondering where that comes from.
I'll just speak to me personally. I'm a curious person, and so I remember after my rookie year, I found out there was a thing called player efficiency rating. I'm like, what is this? What is this number? What does this mean? So I I looked it up. I figured out how they calculated it. I'm like, okay, there's one way to measure a player. I get it. It's really hard with some of these all-encompassing stats to believe them. You know what I mean? I am such a fan of analytics. I'm such a fan of advanced stats. I'm a numbers person. I'm naturally inclined to numbers. But I also am a person that says, oh, there's a number, but why? Like, why does that number look that way? What else is there? And I think the analytics movement gets a bad rap because as players, we at times felt like it was the only thing telling the story. That some teams or some people in certain front offices, that's all they cared about were analytics. And I'll give you an example, like Devin Booker, analytically, advanced stat-wise, like his numbers are good.
Perfect example.
They're not great though. But I can watch a game and see how valuable he is. I can, especially deep in the playoffs, see why he's one of the best players in the world. And so when I think about measuring a player's impact or valuing a player, valuing how good a team is, I look at all of it. Like analytics play a part, advanced stats play a part. To me, counting stats play a part. You need guys that can score at volume with good efficiency. Yeah. And maybe the analytics don't love some of those guys, but you need those guys. So the counting stats matter. The eye tests matter. And people matter. I have this, so fun. Let me find it. Oh, it's right here. A guy just sent me this. I haven't read it yet. I got it literally 2 days ago. It's called The Eye Test, a case for human creativity in the age of analytics. So it's taking a sort of an anti-analytic turn. But I believe this, and this is one of the reasons that sometimes when when front offices put teams together, I'm left scratching my head because I just believe in the sanctity of basketball. I believe in the sanctity of team, and you have to account for the people. You have to account for the personalities and how they mesh and where someone is in their career and whether or not they're ready to sacrifice and whether someone understands, hey, he's the alpha, I've got to be the beta here. Like that's hard to do, and it's all those things. Competitiveness. Like I can talk to a guy, I can observe a guy. I used to say this about my teammates. Like I could come to a new team, and in 3 days I could give you a rundown on a guy. I could see whether or not does this guy actually love basketball or is he good at basketball. And that's hard to do. That's hard to do, but all of that stuff goes into it. And so yeah, I look at Raptor. I'm not gonna lie, I look at Raptor. I do. But I can look at the top 30 list on Raptor and say, okay, there's 10 guys on there that are not 30 of the best players in the world. Like that's easy to do. So, you know, I'm not going to say the player's name, but this was like five years ago. I can't even remember when it was. And I was talking to a friend that works in a front office, and I said to him something like, "What do you guys use?" And he said, "Well, we have our own all-encompassing stat." And I asked him about, it wasn't Raptor, it was a different stat. And he's named the player. He goes, "That's the player that's number one. And if that's the player that's number one, there's something wrong with your stat." So again, I try to take sort of a broad view on everything, and I did that as a player too. And especially towards the end of my career, I was always an elite mid-range shooter, always. And my last couple years, really my last 3 years, because my second year in Philly, they came to me right before training camp, and they were like, "Look, this is how many mid-range pull-ups you shot after a shot fake." And they're like, "If you shot threes instead of a mid-range pull-up, here's your points per shot." And yeah, in a vacuum, yeah, that makes sense. But what if the shot is for me to get inside the line and shoot a 17-footer? What if by me sidestepping, I'm actually creating it? And sure enough, like I shot way more threes that year as a percentage of my shots. My percentage went down. And then the next year in New Orleans, like I had an assistant coach who we're like 10 games into the season, and he's like, I don't know, man, here's your points per shot. Here's when you shoot a pull-up 2, and here's when you shoot a 3. And I'm, all right, now you guys are fucking with me because now it's in my head. Because there's sometimes, and you see this, like you guys watch basketball, you see this. A guy will shot fake.
Yeah.
He'll get run off the line. He'll shot fake. And it is clear as day that the best shot you're going to get on that possession is a pull-up 17-footer. And what does he do? He dribbles all the way into the paint. He doesn't take the pull-up. He doesn't have room for a layup. He kicks the ball. And at no point in time for the rest of the possession does the offense create a shot that was as good as that 17-foot pull-up too. Mm-hmm. And the other part is like we talk about the death of the mid-range, all the time, right? This is the shots we want to hunt. We want to hunt threes, layups, free throws. Go watch the playoffs. Go watch the playoffs, especially deep in the playoffs. The teams that get to the conference finals, the teams that get to the finals, the common denominator, yes, they have shooting. Yes, they can have a guy like Giannis. Yes, they have a guy like LeBron that can get to the rim. But they have mid-range operators. They all do. And you need that. You need shot creation in the mid-range.
I just think it's fascinating because, like, the whole thing you were saying about someone literally coming up to you and handing you a shot chart and saying, here's your points per shot at this location, this location, this location. It's like an imagined conversation that I think fans... Like, that's always been imaginary to me. I didn't think that it was something that actually happens in locker rooms. But you're saying...
I mean, I can do math. I can sit there and say, if I take 10 shots a game and they're all threes and I'm a 40% three-point shooter, I'm going to score 12 points. And if I take 10 pull-up 2s, and even if I hit 50%, I'm going to score 10. I get that. And you extrapolate that over 100 possessions. I get all of that. My point is... possession to possession, you're not going to be able to control every time. This is the shot. Yes, we want to shoot threes, but we want to shoot threes in rhythm. And if in rhythm is the pull-up 2, and you can hit that, I don't even think you need to hit 50%. If you could hit that 44 to 48%, like that's a good shot. You're not going to score on every possession. That's a good shot. That might be the best shot you get on that possession.
Well, the Suns, they got mid-range shooting. Assuming Chris Paul is back and healthy for the playoffs, do you right now consider the Suns to be the favorites to come out of the West or even to win a championship? And who do you think is the biggest threat to them currently?
There's a lot of threats. This is, to me, one of my favorite NBA seasons to watch, and it just so happens to coincide with my retirement and getting to be an analyst. So I feel like there's something amazing to talk about every day, whether it's on the podcast or ESPN. Prior to Chris getting hurt, I thought the Suns were the best team in basketball. They were my favorites to win the West. They were my favorites to win it all. When I look at the Western Conference, I'd say there's two teams that, with a healthy Chris, are really, really good and could certainly beat the Suns. And that's the Memphis Grizzlies and the Golden State Warriors. And, of course, that's health dependent as well. Does the Grizzlies get a healthy Dillon Brooks back? Do the Warriors get a healthy Draymond Green back? The other team in the West, you guys may think I'm crazy, is Denver. And that's all obviously health dependent with MPJ and Jamal, but look, I looked it up today. I was looking at 538 today, and they're really bullish on Denver. Mm-hmm. They're really bullish on him, and obviously they have two team rankings, and the team ranking I was looking at has a lot to do with who the players are. They encompass the player rankings on that, and Jokic is far and away on pretty much every all-encompassing stat, the best player in the league. So that certainly works in the advantage of that. But they were. It was interesting to see how bullish they were, even to where they were projecting their final regular season record. But that's a team to me. Jokic in the playoffs. That's a tough out. Look, it's a tough out if they end up as the 6th seed. They're a tough out. Jokic is that good. And then in the Eastern Conference, that's the most fascinating thing that I can remember in the recent NBA, that you have the odds-on favorite to win the East sitting in 8th place, now 58 to 60 games into the season.
Right.
with a guy who hasn't played all season, your best player coming off a knee injury, and another player, it looks like, and I kind of knew this was coming because I live in New York City, and another player who has been sort of unavailable for most of the season. And they're the number one team in the odds, and they're in 8th place. Then you go down the list of Miami, Milwaukee, 76ers. Those teams are, I think, real contenders. Any of those teams could win.
Chicago, too.
Look, Chicago fans hate me because I said this when I did Countdown. I said, when it's all said and done, I'm talking about the playoffs, not seeding. I think Chicago is the 5th best team in the East if everybody's healthy.
Don't worry, no Chicago fans listen to this podcast.
It's
so
fine.
I think you're fine here.
And I would probably stand by that. Do I think they're the 5th place team and they're 4 rungs away from the first place from the best team? No, absolutely not. My point is they're a little bit below that first tier of teams, but they're excellent. And then on top of that, you have the Boston Celtics, which again, I'm going to go back to 538 today. They've got the highest odds of winning the NBA championship. They get the highest percentage of winning the NBA championship.
Yeah, but that's insane, right?
Like that seems extreme to me. Don't get me wrong. This is where we can look at analytics and be like, okay, all right, there's something wrong with the stat here. But they're really good. I do think they're probably missing a piece or two to be a championship level team, but they're really good. So the Eastern playoffs is going to be a bloodbath. And what's interesting about that conference with the way the first half of the season went, and especially with the Nets, is like we have no idea how these first round playoff matchups are going to look. And there could be some really good teams that get the wrong matchup, and all of a sudden you have a 6-7 seed in the Eastern Conference Finals. So that's fascinating to me. But I think it's those 4 teams in the East that I mentioned: Milwaukee, Philly, 76ers, and Nets. And then I think it's those two other teams, the Warriors, the Grizzlies, that have the best chance of winning besides the Suns.
Before we start to wind down here completely, I think it would be remiss of us, JJ, not to ask, but also congratulate you and Tommy on what you guys are doing with the podcast. You just reached 100 episodes. With Old Man and the Three. Last episode, most recent one, was Jason Tatum. Very good, as always. Of course, I would recommend everyone listening to listen to it, except I assume that they already do. I want to ask specifically, no, really, what you guys are doing is really unique. That's why it was so exciting for us to have you on, as well as a number of other reasons. But I think it's really interesting that you've created something that's this hugely popular, engaging show, right? Hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube. I'm sure you have many more subscribers across all streaming platforms. And yet, at the same time, it still kind of feels like this tight-knit community, and almost like this well-kept secret still, to me, is sort of what it feels like within the NBA community when we talk about getting analysis that just combines really good basketball analysis, right, with also making guys feel comfortable and giving fans access that they want. How have your expectations for your show evolved over your first 100 episodes? And I don't know, is there anything you see as possible now for you guys and in the future that wasn't necessarily possible before?
Yeah, I don't think about expectations when I create content. And I like that you brought up the point that it feels like a tight-knit community, because to me that's what it feels like too. Like we have a lot of really loyal listeners, and I say this all the time, but it's really hard to have a podcast if you don't have an audience. I know that sounds very stupid to say and very like simplistic, but it's very hard to create a weekly show if you don't have people listening and engaging with you. So for me, that's the feedback that we sort of need, and we've taken feedback. You know, we read Instagram comments on our posts. We read our YouTube comments. I engage. I actually, people don't probably catch on to this, but I use my own personal YouTube login to reply. It is JJ Redick, but it's not our verified Old Men and the Three login. So I engage with people on that as well, and we take people's suggestions. Like we want to, again, when I make content, when I do an interview or we do a segment on the show, Like, the goal is just to make it good, interesting, insightful, fun. I can't control people's response to it. And it's the same thing on ESPN. I think Tommy and I, what we try to do as hosts of the show is be authentic and be our true selves. And by doing that, a lot of times we get our guests to be authentic and be their true selves. And there's not, I don't know that there's another NBA show that gets as deep as we get with our NBA players, active NBA players. And we've had different ideas. We've tried some different stuff. Some stuff's really stuck. Some stuff hasn't. So the show is always evolving. But what we decided to do in the fall was just zero in on NBA content, like, because we knew that was our core audience. And I have a bunch of dear friends that support the show, and they listen to every episode, and they will say to me, like, I really like when you have a Bob Iger on. I really like when you have a Stacey Abrams on. And I said, I understand that. I enjoy doing that. But what the audience as a whole has really responded to over the last 3 months is our NBA content. And so we know to really build this show out and make it, I guess I do have a goal, to be honest with you. I would love to be in the same tier and as a Pardon My Take, as a Pat McAfee show, as a Bill Simmons show. Like, we unfortunately, I did 100 episodes before we started The Old Man and Three. I had 2 different RSS feeds, and I didn't get to keep either of them. So when we started this thing,
right,
we had 0 subscribers on Spotify, 0 subscribers on Apple, 0 subscribers on YouTube. And we've built out an audience in 18 months that we're really proud of. And hopefully we can continue to build out our audience. But we always wanted to feel like that tight-knit community. We always wanted to feel like you're in on something that no one else is getting. You're getting this really intimate conversation with a player and an insight from me and Tommy that you're not going to get anywhere else, and that's really the goal.
In my mind, you're in that tier.
Agreed.
Already. So JJ, thank you for joining us. Obviously, everyone listening, listen to The Old Man and the Three podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. JJ, first of all, is there anything else that you'd like to tell the people about? And second of all, it seems like you're in pretty good shape still. Would you like to come out of retirement and join the Suns on this last stretch to win a championship here?
Oh, man. When the season ended last year, I knew I didn't want to play a full season. I was like, man, there's no way I could do another NBA season. Not after the 8 months I just spent away from my family and the 2 months in the bubble. Like, there's no way. But no. And then, it's not a but, it's an and then. And then I spent the whole summer playing golf, reflecting. I still see a therapist, performance coach. I started seeing this guy 3 years ago. We had a bunch of conversations. And it became very clear to me that retirement was the right choice. And I can say unequivocally that I'm as happy as I've ever been. Because my kids are at this sweet spot. They're this amazing age. But, here's the but. There were a few days right before the All-Star break when the trade deadline was happening, and you start seeing different scenarios where I thought to myself, all right, maybe I could be on a roster. I need about 4 weeks to get in shape. And so there were a few days where I thought about it. I will admit that. But no, I'm fully retired. I'm not coming back. Thank you, though.
Yes, well, we appreciate you joining us, and we appreciate you being the voice of reason on ESPN constantly. Thank you so much, JJ.
You're welcome. I do want to say one thing to your listeners, and that is just I have such a deep appreciation for the content you guys are making, really for all the team-specific podcasts that exist. Because I understand fandom. I really do. And I think it's just amazing that you guys, I follow you guys on Twitter, and I know how serious you are about the game, and I know how much you put into the show and your analysis. And so I'm just very appreciative of you, and I'm also appreciative of your audience and all the people, Phoenix Suns fans, Memphis Grizzlies fans, across the board. Like, our game is so good because we have such great fans. And this ancillary content around the game is appreciated, and I appreciate great content, and you guys are doing it. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, JJ.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, Blue Label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnywalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.